So today we are discussing two at a time socks and two at a time gauntlets. So you'll need two 16-inch circular needles of two different materials. You'll see here I have a wood needle and a metal needle. The reason I ask you to do 16 inches is because the needle section itself is actually quite shorter than a regular needle. And since you don't have a ton of stitches on a sock, like here, it keeps the stitches up where they need to be, and you'll actually be able to reduce the laddering on the sides if you use the 16-inch. So the two materials are, because we're going to separate the two sides of the sock or the gauntlet, one on wood and one on metal. You'll also notice that my yarn, I'm using worsted weight today, my yarn is separated in two equal balls. That's because you're doing two socks or two gauntlets at the same time, so you'll need them in two separate balls. So the first thing we're going to do is the cast on. The cast on, you need to cast on only with your wood needle at first. So you're going to grab one skein of yarn. I'm going to be casting on 32 because this is actually for the gauntlets. You'll use a normal long tail cast on. Honestly, you can cast on however you want to cast on, your normal way. I'm going to use the long tail because it's the most flexible, the easiest, the fastest, all that jazz. And I'm going to do 32. Oops, okay, 31 and 32. Okay, so once you have 32 stitches cast onto your wood needle, you're going to grab your metal needle, starting where you ended, so where the yarn is hanging down. You will tip to tip transfer half of those stitches. So that's 16 stitches in my case. 1, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, at this point, you're going to hold the two needles parallel at the top, and you're going to slide the stitches all the way down to the bottom. You don't need to slide them all the way onto the needles themselves, just down here and out of the way so they're not going to fall off. You will then use, again, only the wood needle and your second skein of yarn, and you'll cast on another, whatever it is for you, for me, 32 stitches, onto the wood needle only. And obviously you're at the other end and away from the stitches that you just slid down. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 9, 30, 31, and 32. So once you have your 32 on there, okay, you're going to pick up your needles. Again, you're going to go tip to tip, but look at the bottom needles. You want to make sure that those two needles are still parallel, still hanging out next to each other, that you have not inadvertently grabbed this end and pulled it up. So the two are down, looks like little cowboy legs with the cowboy boots hanging out. You're then going to, once again, from where you ended and your yarn is hanging down, transfer half the stitches. So in this case, that's 16. 2, 3, 4, 13, 14, 15, and 16. You should double check your count. You're going to just slide them down. You will know that your cast on is correct. You can see that at the very beginning you have yarn right here, and your second one, the yarn is in the middle. So they basically follow each other. They're an exact replicate. You will not have it where your yarn is both hanging out in the middle or the yarn is at this end and that end. So again, yarn at the very beginning and yarn in the middle. For the socks and the gauntlets, the wood needles will represent the very front. So it'll be the top of the hand or the top of the foot, and your metal needles will be the palm of the hand or the bottom of the foot. In terms of rules for this, you will always knit wood needle to wood needle and metal needle to metal needle. Never in this entire process will you knit metal to wood. So if you start to do that, you know you're wrong and you're going to have to tink that back. All right. To join in the round, all you have to do is start knitting. So make sure that your cast on is facing each other so that you're not twisted in any way, because you don't want Mobius socks or gauntlets. You are not going to be knitting on the metal, so you just slide it down out of the way. You will be knitting on the wood, and you'll be knitting, of course, wood to wood. So you grab your wood needle, there we go, and you grab your yarn but not your tail. Let's see if I did good. I did. And you are going to begin a 1-by-1 rib, or whatever your pattern tells you to do. You'll notice that the yarn is coming from the back needle, right, or the back cable. That's how you join in the round. So I'm going to do my knit 1, purl 1, and you're working a knit 1, purl 1 rib all the way to the end. On the second sock, I will attempt to do that in the throwing method, although I am naturally a continental knitter, so that's a little harder for me, but I understand the need to see both ways. So your knit 1, purl 1 rib all the way to the end. Now, watch closely as I go from one wood needle to the other. You can see right here, I've just finished working. This is a sock I've just finished. I'm going to slide those stitches out of my way, but still hold on to that needle. Get rid of that yarn because I'm going to knit with my second ball of yarn because I'm doing 2 socks at the same time, or in this case 2 gauntlets. Okay, my needle that the yarn is going to come from has to be in the back. So on this very first round, and really on the first couple rounds, there's a little rearranging that has to be done. Make sure that needle or cable is in the back, that your wood needle that you're going to knit to is in the front. You grab that yarn, and I will try to do this with my right hand this time. And you're going to come into the stitch, grab your yarn, and come around. And again, just by that motion, you have just joined it to knit around. You can tighten it a little bit to try to avoid the gap, but you're going to get a little bit of a gap in this very first one. Just try not to worry about it too much. It will actually clean itself up in the next couple rounds. So, I don't do this very often. Knit in your knit 1, purl 1 rib all the way across. And at this point, I'm going to switch back since I've given you enough of a demonstration English style to my way so that we're not doing this all day long. Okay, so knit 1, purl 1, all the way to the end. So you know you've completed the front of both socks or gauntlets when both of your wood needles are finished knitting, but you have not yet completed a round because a round is completed when you've knitted both the wood needles and the metal needles. Your yarn is going to get massively twisted in the first little bit, but don't worry about it. Just kind of do a little management. And it's kind of the same as the double pointed needles. Okay, so now we are going to be knitting the metal needles. So you're going to take the yarn's always going to come from the back needle. So now we're going to be knitting on the metal needle, and the yarn's going to be coming from the back, which is the wood needle. Because we're not knitting on the wood needle, I'm going to pull it out of the way so I'm not tempted to knit with it. I'm going to find my metal needle and I'm going to pull it up. Every single time I pull that yarn from the back needle and knit the front needle, it closes the gap for knitting in the round. So I'm going to again knit 1, purl 1 rib across all of my metal needles. The reason that I choose to do metal needles for the back needles for socks is because metal needles tend to be sharper, have a sharper point than wood needles. And in socks, all of your manipulation is in the heel, right? So picking up of stitches, etc., etc. And so I just chose to have the sharper one in the back. But you can really choose it either way. Although every one of my patterns talks about wood needles being front needles. So, okay, that's your first one. Again, I just finished my metal. So I'm going to drop my old yarn because I'm not going to knit from that one because it belongs to that sock only. I'm going to move them down a little bit so that I have this metal needle ready. See the little cable right here? So we call this like a closed or a circular position. I know since my metal needles are still hanging out right next to each other, I'm going to knit metal again. So I'm just going to slide my stitches up. There is really only one place I can go to knit the next thing where the yarn's going to come from the back needle and I have stitches ready to knit on the front needle, and that is right there. So I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, all the way across again. It's exceptionally pretty yarn. Okay, when you get to the end of the metal needles, you know you've completed a round. And when you get to the end of the second needle, when you go to turn your work, you're essentially going to turn it almost like you're knitting flat. So now my needles are open, right? There's no closed or circular motion there. So when that happens, I'm just going to turn my work like I were knitting flat. And now I'm ready again to work on my wood needles. So a couple reminders. Number 1, you will only ever knit wood needle to wood needle, never metal to wood. So wood to wood and metal to metal. Your yarn, when you're in the round, your yarn will always come from the back needle, right? The back needle or the back cable. And you'll always knit the front needle. Now, really importantly, you will never, when you're in the round, you will never knit the needle that the yarn is actually attached to. Because if you think about it, this is my right side, and this is my right side, and the inside is my wrong side. So if I knit this needle, I am working on my wrong side. So again, you're just going to pull that yarn from the back needle, to the front, and you're going to continue working in your 1x1 rib as far as you need to for either gauntlets or socks. So that's the end of the cast on.